Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm deeply honored to welcome all of you here today to the significant webinar where we will be discussing the topic on navigating economic and business risks for South Africa and its water crisis. The event couldn't have come at a more crucial time. I'm sure you would agree with me on this one, as we are currently finding ourselves to grapple with the escalating challenges that is posed by water scarcity in our country. And I mean, the severity of our South African water crisis cannot be overestimated. It is a crisis that transcends mere inconvenience. It has threatened the very fabric of our society. It impacts our economy, our business, as well as every citizen across the board. The ramifications are profound and far reaching, touching every sector of our society. Well, today we are gathering here to shed light on this pressing issue, to dissect its complexities, and most importantly, to explore viable solutions. We are fortunate to have with us a distinguished panel of experts. Each of them bring a unique perspective wealth of experience to the table. Firstly, Jeremy Max, of course, a seasoned media specialist from Brave Group. He will be guiding us through today's discussions as our facilitator. His insights, expertise will undoubtedly enrich the dialogue. We are also privileged to have Tony here. He's a director of Nanodine Systems. He's also joining us with his deep understanding of environmental science, water management, and Anthony will offer invaluable insights into the intricacies of water and pathways going forward. Furthermore, we have Kirishan. Kirishan is the CEO of Black Fox, gracing us with his presence all the way from the US. His perspective as a leader in business sustainability will be instrumental to assist us to chart a course towards resilience and innovation in the face of adversity. And of course, I also have Volker. Volker is an esteemed expert in risk management. His extensive experience in helping organizations will assist us to navigate this complex risk landscape. He'll also provide us with great insights into mitigating economic and business risk. Ladies and gentlemen, most importantly, I have you here, my esteemed members, our guests. This event webinar has gathered about 341 registrations from around the country as well as beyond borders. We've got representation here from Zimbabwe, we've got attendees from Lesotho, Eswatini, and we've got Namibia as well. This turnout demonstrates how Africans are interconnected and how we can leverage from our mutual interests and concerns. So throughout the discussions today, we will delve into the multifaceted impacts of water crisis in our economy and society at large. We'll confront the harsh realities head on, but most importantly, we will seek opportunities for collaboration. We will think of innovation and collective action. So as we navigate this turbulence, let us remember that adversity always brings a unique way of fostering creativity and resilience. So today, may we make it a starting point to have a concerted effort to safeguard our most precious resource and build a more sustainable future for the generations to come. Once again, I extend my warmest welcome to each and every one of you. Your presence here today shows your commitment to tackling one of the greatest challenges of our time. And for that, I am sincerely grateful. Please be on the lookout for upcoming events. We've got training and professionalization workshops lined up. We have some initiatives, including the logbook workshop on the 6th of June. We are going to be having a post-election webinar aptly titled beyond the ballot. Be on the lookout and register for it, be part of discussions. So with that, I would like to welcome all of you here. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the webinar. With that, I hand over to Jeremy.
Yvonne, thank you very much indeed. And let's wade straight into it if we can. I am hoping that this webinar today is going to provide our participants with actionable insights into effective risk management strategies that can safeguard businesses against the immediate and long-term impacts of water scarcity. What you have done is introduce the panel, Professor Anthony Turton, Karushan Govender, and Volker van Verden. Just to recap very quickly, Anthony is a scientist specializing in water resource management as a strategic issue. Karushan is author of the book Age of Agency, Rise with AI, founder, as you say, of the strategic tech marketing agency Black Fox, and he also has experience working in the water space. And then Volker van Verden, strategic risk principal at Risconet Africa. So that's the panel. Let's wade straight into it. Just in terms of protocol, I will keep a very close eye on the Q&A box today, not the chat box, the Q&A box, and I will try throughout the course of the session to bleed in as many questions as I can to our panel members. Anthony Turton, let me come to you first of all and ask you for the macro picture if I can. Are we over or underestimating the problem of water in South Africa when it comes to risk?
Yes, good afternoon to you and the listeners. The water landscape is actually a fairly nuanced and fairly complex landscape, so I'm going to try and simplify it. We do not have a water scarcity problem in South Africa, although this is what is intuitively believed to be the case. We actually have a problem of failing soft infrastructure, in other words, institutional failure. And this is a very, very debilitating factor because the majority of our economy is concentrated in large urban areas, metro areas, and it's those areas where your institutional failure is the most. And there are basically two types of failure. The first type of failure is the failure to meet the assurance of supply standard. So that's a technical word, assurance of supply. Assurance of supply is the guarantee of 6 different things in every time you open the tap or every time that your factory requires water. And that's the guarantee of water at a given quality, at a given pressure, at a given price, at a given time, and at a given place. That's the assurance of supply. And those 6 elements are no longer available at the required level. So we have already failed. It's not as if we are going to fail. We have already failed, but the failure has not yet been completely catastrophic. So that's the one side. The one side of the equation is the failure of assurance of supply as a direct result of institutional failures. The second problem that we have, which is a national problem, is the failure of our sewage management. And the listeners need to understand from a risk management perspective that because South Africa is a water-constrained economy, a decision was taken by very smart engineers many years ago to recycle all of our water. But because people at that point in time were not willing to contemplate reprocess sewage as drinking water, the decision was made to go to what is known as an indirect reuse model. And the indirect reuse model means that of the plus minus 1,000 wastewater treatment works in the country that produce 7 billion litres of sewage every day, they have to be treated and processed to the highest possible standard before being discharged back in the river, because the indirect reuse model says that that water goes back into the river, flows down the river a short distance, and then gets abstracted for drinking purposes. So we separate our waste management and our potable management, and that's what the blue and the green drop report is about. Blue drop is about potable water, green drop is about water in the aquatic ecosystems specifically impacted by wastewater. So that's our problem. We've got a national sewage crisis on the one hand. Therefore, our fundamental engineering design for the entire economy is now being overwhelmed by the fact that the systems were never ever designed to take sewage contaminated water and treat it to potable standards. So that's one of the elements of the assurance of supply problem I told you about earlier on. But and then on the other hand, we've got institutional failure, and those institutional failures are quite profound because they mean that we are unable to get ahead of the curve without some really, really very fancy gymnastics that we're going to have to do in the near term future. So that's my sort of overview of the situation in South Africa. We became a fundamentally water constrained economy in 2002 when the National Water Act determined that we had allocated 98% of all the water we have available at a high assurance of supply. So 2002, we literally transitioned to a fundamentally water constrained economy. Back to you, Jeremy.
Thank you very much, Anthony. So that is of huge concern, I imagine, to the business community. So, Karushan Governor, let me come to you then, having listened to that, particularly the two big problems, assurance of supply and sewage. What do you believe then are the primary economic risks associated with this crisis that we're experiencing?
Yeah, so I think that, can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. I am sitting in a public location, so I wanted to make sure that there's no sound interference. So the South African water crisis, the supply crisis that we're currently facing, it is a multifaceted crisis, and as was just mentioned right now, there's you can zero in on the specific dimensions or elements that contributing towards this big problem. From my perspective, as you introduced me initially, you did mention that I have some experience in the area of water. You can tackle this massive problem from many different vantage points. And for me personally, just in terms of my experience and my work with municipalities, specifically in regards to their O&M systems, which is their operations and management systems, my address to this problem is a lot more tactical and it's less holistic. So when I look at this problem, I tend to, I feel for sanity's sake, let's zero in on a very specific, manageable, pragmatic zone within the broader scope of the problem. And for me, that is looking at something that can be addressed in the near term, something that could thus then impact several businesses and households alike with a fairly immediate solution. And that's this whole subject of water that's currently being lost from our systems that cannot be accounted for. So granted, this is not necessarily what I'm discussing right now. It's not the holistic solution, like I said, but it's definitely an important first step. South Africa has a remarkably high rate of lost water. The broad term for this would be non-revenue water, and 50% of our water is lost through non-revenue. 25% of that is, you could say, is a combination of the water that is given to households for free as that basic grant to all households in the country. So within that 25% that's lost, or within the broader 50%, 25%, if we break that down, that's 25% is the basic grant together with theft. So that the first 25% is not necessarily an administrative problem. It is a problem where we do have theft in the country, and we do also give water away for free intentionally. So that's not really something we could really blame government for. But even if you eliminated that, okay, and if you took that away, we still have 25% of our country's water that is lost through leaking pipes. That's the net effect of where we are today. And if you eliminate the 25% that's lost through theft and through water that we give away, we still are very high from a global perspective. We rank very high in terms of our non-revenue water figure, because it means that we're still losing a quarter of our water, a very precious resource. This water that is drinkable, potable water is literally just being lost to leaking pipes. And that now implies poor administration. That implies poor infrastructure management. That implies that as a service delivery entity or a set of entities, we are failing. just by global standards, you know, the non-revenue water, this aspect of non-revenue water, you know, in some instances it's 8%. In some of the less developing countries, it rises up to about 25-27%. So we're in that top zone of non-revenue water countries that's losing water through leaking pipes. And I think that at this stage, I don't want to, you know, jump to any solution conversation, because we're really just unpacking the discussion and what it means for businesses. I do think that businesses need to start becoming a lot more alert to the fact that this is the risk. The risk is the aspect of our water crisis that is emanating from our own inability to run and manage our O&M, our operations and management effectively, through a lack of systems, through a lack of oversight, through a lack of suitable technology. Perhaps in some instances, the right skilled resources are not present to do the job. So this is a massive risk that we are facing, where beyond global issues surrounding water supply, even if you had to remove all of those factors within our current supply of water, we're unable to get that water stably and successfully to you know, end users of water in a reliable format and in a predictable format. And this is the inherent cause, in my opinion, in terms of how I've scoped this problem. This is a major factor that is behind the risk that we all see.
Karushan, thank you very much indeed. So Volker van Wirden, to you then. We've spoken about assurance of supply. We've spoken about the sewage crisis, and Karushan has unpacked for us the whole issue around non-revenue water, basically leaking pipes. So do you think, first of all, that businesses are prioritizing water risk in their risk management strategies? And if they're not, how do they need to start getting into the game?
Yeah, so I think businesses have made some attempts. I think they certainly make the basic attempts of having water storage on site. I think what they're not prioritizing is understanding that water capacity evaporates, pun intended, very quickly when something goes wrong. And in that context, the sustainability strategy and planning for businesses, I haven't seen executed very well in many cases. The point is that if you look at what a business needs to continue operating, whether it's a factory or it is an office of 100 or 500 people, you need tens of thousands of liters of water. And if you're looking at a week, you probably think of 100,000. And that's nowhere near the couple of tanks that are on site that you'll find in a few places. Similarly, when waste facilities not working, one's not allowed to have staff at the office unless you've routed your water correctly and you can have waste and your toilets working correctly. So the answer is, in very few cases, is it true? And the other side of it is that if it was done in a more strategic risk solution set, it would actually become an economic advantage. So there's always an upside to risk and a silver lining to it. And so if you combine, for example, rainwater harvesting with on-site storage and filtration and pumping systems, yes, they cost a little bit, like all of our solar does, but in fact, it creates a much more sustainable and durable solution on-site. And the same applies in many environments. One can do a shared application. They can do all sorts of things when you're thinking strategically and in the medium term.
So Professor Anthony Turton, let me bring you back into the conversation then. If we should have a strategic and a more all-encompassing approach, in other words, creating an ecosystem, as Volker van Wirden is suggesting, how do you start that process from a water management perspective?
Yes, I think firstly, there's been a bit of a renaissance of late. I've had a lot of high-level engagement in the recent past, from the Minister, the DG of Water Affairs, senior executives in Rand Water and Johannesburg Water, these sort of entities, East Rand Water. So there seems to be an awakening at that level that things cannot carry on. I've also had quite a lot of dealing with various listed companies that are starting to wake up and smell the roses as well. I'd like to agree with what Volker said there, that I've yet to see a real in-depth understanding at executive decision-making level, for the very simple reason that the basics are not in place. And I'd like to also support the previous speaker about the fact that we've got to start focusing on bite-sized realities. And I would suggest that the point of departure is we have to start talking about the digitization of the water value chain. And that's a terribly important thing, because we're living now in the world of the Internet of Things. And gone are the days where you don't know what's happening, in terms of a whole bunch of variables that are mission critical to your operation. And let me give an example. I've recently done a high risk strategic risk assessment for a client of mine, and they were completely unaware of the total volume of water that flows through their plant. These people own a number of factories, and they had no idea what the daily volumetric consumption was on their plant. Absolutely no idea at all. They accepted that what the municipality told them in terms of their bill, they accepted that was the number. Now that's the first red flag. So you need to start developing this digital platform, and you've got to start off with your incoming flow of water that comes across from the municipality. So the first thing is, what is the pressure coming in? What is the volumetric flow? And then you can also do some other very simple digital instrumentation. For example, what is the electrical conductivity? What is the pH? There are other things you can also do that are quite simple, but basically those are the simple parameters that need to be brought in. Why is this important? Well, the first thing that's important is that the municipality is very often not billing you correctly. And secondly, with the official strategy nowadays of government, so-called water shifting leaves the pipes filled with air for long periods of time. And when the water meters now fire up again with increased pressure in the system, your meters spin at a very high velocity. So you're getting overcharged for the water that you're putting in. So you need to understand that how much volume is coming in. And the second thing that you need to understand, and this is from a fire risk management perspective, what is the pressure of the water coming in? Because what I found in many cases on the assurance of supply side, it's not that you have no water at all. It's that the water that you have is either of an inferior quality or it's of an inferior pressure. And you must remember that your fire hydrants and fire risk is defined by very precise standards of what the pressures and flows have to be at each of the hydrants. So once it starts at that point, once you've got your data set coming in, what is the actual pressure, what is the actual flow at any moment in time, in real time, then you start looking at how much of that flow is diverted to human hygiene, in other words, to staff hygiene purposes, how much of that becomes product, and how much of that becomes processed water. And once you start doing that, you can now start getting a mass balance on site. And only once you have that data can you now start making engineering design decisions about, for example, if there is a breakdown, how long is the breakdown, how long is the disruption, therefore how long do you have to store water on site, therefore because you use X volume on every per 24 hours, and you've now historically proven that your longest breakdown is 10 days, say, so therefore it's X times 10, that becomes the volume that you have to store on site. So then you start scoping out your engineering works. And of course, I've not seen that happen at any stage in South Africa at executive decision-making level. In fact, on the contrary, I've seen resistance to that, because executives generally have so many other issues to deal with, and they're constantly bombarded by the media with this notion that water is a looming crisis, which means it's not here yet. It's something that's still over the horizon. They haven't yet got to deal with it, and they're simply overwhelmed by all the other things that they have to deal with. So I would start off with this the digitization of the water value chain, and you start at company level, and you also look at municipal level and at water board level. Each of those things should feed into each other over time. Back to you.
Karush and Govender, thank you, Anthony. Karush and Govender, back to you. What is your understanding then of the digitization of the water value chain, and how can you use AI or predictive analytics to mitigate risk more effectively?
I just have to start by commenting on the fact that Professor Anthony Turton is such a fountain of insight. Do you see what I did there? But moving along from my attempt at humor.
And we forgive you, KG.
So if we take a moment to look at the discussion that was just had about really digitizing within the organization itself, really understanding the nuts and bolts. I mean, I'm not sure there's any business owner out there who really gets into that level of detail necessarily. I mean, I'm sure if you're very water dependent, you might into that level of detail, like understanding all of your aspects of metering, understanding all of your aspects around the flow of water, etc. And you know what? You can kind of understand why someone wouldn't do that, because it does require a certain type of technical insight, which is not always available to the general business practitioner, right? Now, the good news is that at the business level, with some of the advancements we're getting in terms of technology and the overlay of effective digitization technology in businesses, we're seeing a tremendous change in our ability to do all of this kind of oversight in a very easy way without having to be very technically inclined. So without having all of that in-depth understanding, you can actually use clever AI protocol to pick up anomalies and determine what's going on and provide the right kind of flagging, so that you only start getting involved when it's necessary. Things like your flow of water, things like using flow data, and then cross-pollinating that against for example, the data to do with your pressure, and that automatic cross-pollination to evolve a deduction that might say that, hey, we have a leak. That is now possible through the use of AI. Now, obviously, that's relevant and important at the business level, because like I said, there's many things that the business doesn't necessarily have expertise to do or go and hire experts to do, and AI can now do this very easily. But I want to actually zoom out a bit, and I want to say that businesses have to take responsibility for this next point. We cannot leave it to national government, and we cannot leave this to provincial government. Business has a very important duty to partner with their municipality as they would with any other mission critical supplier. The fact of the matter is, a municipality is a retail outlet that is ultimately distributing water to the end customer. They are obviously purchasing it backwards from their supplier. And I think it's very important for businesses to start going up the value chain and really taking responsibility for ensuring that there's accuracy in terms of that supplier relationship. Specifically with regards to the use of technology, in the past, we really, and I know this, I've been dealing with municipalities for many years. And what's interesting with a whole host of municipalities is that the lack of knowledge of the piping infrastructure, that has been a huge bugbear. It's been a huge challenge for municipalities in our country for decades. And now that problem is factually gone. Like I was mentioning earlier, just the mere fact that we can use, basic data sets, like we could use things like our flow data, our pressure data, and we can really zero in, we can pinpoint leak locations. We're able to make effective deductions without good infrastructure mapping, which is, like I mentioned, lacking across the board. We can really start to impact how municipalities are operating in their supply or in their retail efforts to their customers. And I don't think, like I said, that this is going to be driven at a national level right now. So it is incumbent upon each of us to take our suppliers under our wing and help them give us the correct supply as much as possible. There's also many different water quality surveillance solutions which are now possible. Things like getting more precise about the kind of water that we're admitting into our business, and being able to use effective digital technologies in concert with IoT was mentioned earlier. And this simply means the introduction of additional devices, many of them micro devices, into your water supply chain, so that you can get smarter about how you track things, the movement of water, how you're tracking quality of water, etc. Also, and I suppose I'll wrap it up here. There are a couple of other things, but I'll just use this as a tangible example. Predictive maintenance is another important topic. And we have to work on elevating predictive maintenance within our businesses and up the value chain into the municipality. Predictive maintenance was almost like, something that we never got around to because, we could barely even cope with maintaining what we already have and, or solving the problems that we already have. But predictive maintenance are now, it's now possible. One of the big things that stopped us from being able to really engage in good, effective predictive maintenance was that we didn't always know our infrastructure. Like I said, the infrastructure mapping has been poor. So even an organization might not necessarily understand the direct risks associated with their immediate supply. Not talking about the whole municipal jurisdiction, but their immediate supply. Is there a particular constraint on their supply point from an infrastructure point of view using the infrastructure map? It is hard to tell that kind of stuff. But now, with the basic, with the introduction of AI and with some predictive, algorithms, with some basic AI techniques, it's very easy for business to go in and detect within their grid and their immediate zone what are the particular vulnerabilities that live on their immediate supply chain in their zone. And by using these techniques in concert with the municipality, you can then really mitigate against some of the major risks that could come up, and then use predictive maintenance techniques to go ahead and work with the municipality and partner with the municipality to solve those problems in advance, so that at least, number one, you know that it's coming and you can think with it, and number two, you can also be more proactive in your supplier engagement to proactively correct.
So to the 150 risk managers, Volker, that are sitting in this webinar this afternoon, Anthony has raised the whole issue of digitization as far as the water supply chain is concerned, and Karushan has spoken about the importance of artificial intelligence and predictive analytics. So back to risk managers, how do they need to start thinking about effectively quantifying the risk associated with water scarcity, and then coming up with a cost-effective and tangible plan to present to the board?
Risk managers understand business interruption. And if we look at it and say, what is the opportunity cost or loss of not having water in a business? And we saw earlier, it could be the productive process. It can be water that goes into our product, or it could be there to keep the people in the building because it's a legislated item for them to have water when they're in the building. And all of those could stop the business if there was an absence of water. So one can take a straightforward calculation of what are the gross profits that we lose by not being in operation for that period of time. And I think that is a little hint to the opportunity cost and loss factor thinking that I think is absent in some of the stuff. And it also goes back to the technology opportunities that Karushan identified a little earlier. So if we said, well, look, and I know we only talk about business, but I think it applies to communities and maybe business parks or commercial areas and the like. We have a major challenge in trying to repair, pick a number, 100,000 kilometers of pipes. That just sounds like far too big a problem to solve. We did say, let's do this one, chunk at a time. But what if the problem was not being solved at the 1,000-kilometer pipe level? We were bringing water and harvesting water at a community level. And then if you look at the risk-reward equation and say, but we're going to lose, let's say, a month's gross profit of R1 million or whatever the number is. But the water equation for us to harvest water, invest in it, and sustain our own water and treat that water on site might be 5 million or 10 million rand, but the return over the 5 or 10 years, because this is now a capital asset, is enormous. And as we've seen with solar plants and many others, the cost of solar energy is now 1/3 of the cost of getting electricity from Eskom. So if we look at the total cost of repairing pipes and doing this and rebuilding infrastructure to holding water in the place when it's needed and combining water harvesting in a business environment, in a water park, in a business park, and I realize one loses scale efficiency, but one saves massive amounts of cost at the infrastructure level. And then what you do is you share and you see how do we do water sharing in our own environment. And you don't have the risk of things like your water meter spinning because of high pressure air going through it. You've got an exact metered environment. So the first issue is, what is the cost of the business not running? The next issue is, we can actually reduce the cost of water over the next 5 or 10 years if we box clever and we hold grey water for the right reasons. We purify only what we're going to drink, and the rest of it goes into our factories or into our processes. That kind of thinking I also don't see. But it always seems like a bridge too far. But the people who innovate and they go down this road, they become resilient, they become clever, they then a step ahead of their competitors. And I think that kind of thinking is applied equally, as I say, at business park level and at community level. And that should actually, so there should be a water tank under every single low-cost house or future houses. Exactly the same works in Bermuda. You cannot build in Bermuda unless you have a swimming pool under your house, which is your water tank for 2 or 3 years. It's exactly the same thing. And then the only thing you really build is the treatment of wastewater. So I think that the understanding of risk and the economics of risk and the opportunity is what's missing in the treatment of this risk, because we're only looking at it as the absence of water and the prohibitive cost, and instead of the opportunity of being resilient and harvesting water where we need it, which is at the site of the business.
Volker, I just want to say to everyone who's watching this afternoon that if you need to lead a fact-finding mission to Bermuda on behalf of the Institute of Risk Management, I'm very happy to accompany you. It won't be a problem at all. Anthony Turton, Karushan Gavada mentioned the importance of managing and developing a relationship with municipalities. There is a question here directed at you specifically, which says, how can business help solve the failure of water service authorities without becoming a municipality themselves? So again, I'd like you to talk, if you can, about that line of elasticity and tension that must exist between business and the authorities, because you don't want that to snap either.
Yes, that's a great question. So if I look into the future, so with actionable intelligence, I'm in the business of actionable intelligence. So what is likely to happen in the next 10 years in South Africa? I think we are unlikely to see an improvement in service delivery from municipalities. If anything, it's likely to continue to be under severe pressure. At best, we might be able to stabilize it, but we are unlikely to improve it. So what I think we're going to see over the next short to medium term is that things like body corporates or corporate business parks, etc., they are going to start taking on the responsibility of water service provision and also wastewater provision. You must appreciate that businesses can't expand, or that new properties can't be built at the moment because there's a moratorium placed on the fact that there's not enough wastewater handling capability for them. So I think in the near future, you're going to start seeing the emergence of water service authorities at the level, let's say closer to the level of the production unit. In other words, either the factory or the community, the business park in which that factory is located. I think this is inevitable. This is part and parcel of the public-private partnership model that is currently evolving, and I think it's in particular this is going to roll out along the coastal areas, where all your coastal cities are going to start using that kind of model to raise private capital for the desalination of seawater. I see that as a very, very important component of your metros along the coast. So yeah, that's the important aspect. It's not a question of replacing the municipality. It's a question of forming a new relationship, because the municipality is simply unable to do what is required, and it's going to come down to a hard, cold business decision. What is the cost of doing business under these circumstances? And in an extreme case, the decision is the cost of doing business is just too high, in which case you then got to make a decision to either downscale or to offload your equity to somebody else. So that's an extreme case. So we're talking now about a survival case where I see this future co-evolution of partnerships between the public and private sectors, and I see it's going to be rolled out at the level of, let's call it the business community, not necessarily the individual factory. Why? Because the economy of scale scale always matters. It's always more efficient to to service these things in a business park than it is to provide the services at an individual business. But there's one other thing I just want to add on to what Karishan was saying about this predictive AI. Predictive AI is not a big mystery. It's not a complicated thing, and it's very easy to actually do. And I mentioned earlier on about the need to monitor these most basic parameters. And I mentioned an instrument stack with 5 different digital instruments in it that measures things like pressure, things like conductivity, electrical conductivity, things like chlorine content. Why is that important? Because once you start seeing a slight fluctuation in any of those off the norm, it's very often a precursor to something bad coming down in the future. In other words, the ability to predict a future breakdown is of great importance. And I've been fiddling with that thing with a very simple algorithm, and I can predict in the municipality where I live now, I can predict when the municipal system is going to crash, probably at least sort of let's call it 12 hours in advance. And that's just from monitoring things like chlorine. Why? Because when there's a problem at the water processing plant, they very often overdose with chlorine. Or if there's a problem in the pipeline somewhere, they fix it up, and they then add additional chlorine. So any fluctuation in chlorine is a precursor to something big happening in the system, and any fluctuation in pressure is also. So in other words, without spending a huge amount of money, you can start developing a predictive capability, and it's really a no-brainer to start seeing the value of being able to predict, let's say 6 hours in advance, let's say half a day in advance, to predict that the system is going to become unstable and that you have to do something about it. So this is what I see happening in the near future. It's not rocket science. I'm doing a lot of work in the Middle East at the moment now on AI platforms, and we're getting quite sophisticated there on this type of algorithm and this type of thinking.
So, Karushan, let me throw it back to you if I can. 2 questions. One is, if you're building some form of AI dashboard to effectively monitor water supply and quality, I guess, how do you go about doing that? And I'm also wondering to myself, as I've listened to both you and Anthony talking, whether using AI in water resource management has raised any ethical questions like privacy, for instance, or does the problem trump that?
Okay, so let's start with the first point here. I think that we need to, we really need to look at the fact that this whole problem is very easily solved. I mean, you mentioning a dashboard. The truth of the matter is that there are multiple dashboards, there are multiple techniques, there are multiple solutions that are available right this second. Like Professor Anthony mentioned, none of this is futuristic. None of this is something that is, yet to hit South Africa. It's easily available. The only question is, which product do we want to back? Specifically, what application do we want to go ahead with? Meaning, which vendor do we want to work with? Do we want to work with vendor A who sells product A, or do we want to work with vendor B who sells product B? That's really where we're at in this discussion. All the solutions abound. The various dashboards exist. This technology is proliferating very quickly right now. And I think right now, because of the ease of availability of these systems to do all of the various techniques that we've mentioned, predictive maintenance, using flow data, pressure data to evolve an infrastructure mapping exercise that has not been completed to date by a municipality, together with demand forecasting. All of these very basic things can be done in a heartbeat right now. I want to add to that. I want to say that, folks, we have lost a lot of faith in our municipalities from a service delivery point of view, and I get it. I'm going to assume a position of neutrality on this. It's not about the municipality. This is not a political conversation. This is about businesses managing their risks. And in order to do so, it's very vital that we all take the responsibility of going upstream again, see what I did there, moving upstream to like have the discussion at the higher point of the value chain and really get municipalities to get going with this. Like, this is good for the business, this is good for the municipality, this is good all around. Businesses do need their own demand forecasting tool, right? And that's an AI-based tool. Ultimately, you want to know when, as a business, when your demand peaks are and when your demand troughs are, and that's good for your business management. But that's going to be so much more powerful when you take that data and use it in concert with other predictive techniques that's being run at the municipality level. Folks, you have to understand the main inhibitor at the municipality level, the reason why we didn't move ahead with very sophisticated O&M solutions in the past is because infrastructure mapping has been one of South Africa's biggest challenges from a municipal administration point of view. So the municipal administration has generally suffered from a lack of effective infrastructure mapping, which then prohibited the introduction of very sophisticated technologies onto that specific zone. Because obviously, in the absence of knowing what you're working with, it's hard to then go and build out solutions on that. So digital capability was constrained, but that constraint is no longer a thing. AI has taken that problem away. And by the way, AI has done that in a whole host of ways beyond just the example I'm giving. But specifically, this example is critical because it so much rests on this. We didn't know where the pipes were, and so we couldn't do much. Now we don't have to know where the pipes are. So the constraint to taking a quantum leap forward from a digitization point of view is now gone, and we are ready to take that quantum leap. That's point one. And point two, the solutions that make this quantum leap possible are easily available, it's affordable, it's doable. So at the business level, you can get some of that solution or that digitization going at the level of your organization from a risk management point of view. And again, demand planning is a huge point that should be stressed at this stage. Managing your demand, understanding your peaks, understanding your usage requirements, and then going up the value chain into the municipality and mapping your usage requirements back to the municipality systems and really encouraging the municipality to start embarking on its own digitization crusade and really supporting and working with that supply management aspect that I mentioned earlier, really partnering with the municipality as your supplier in order to mitigate future risks. So that's the first part, the first thing that you asked. Jeremy, please remind me the second question because I lost track somewhere along the line.
The second question was, if you're using AI to manage the process, Karushan, are there ethical or privacy issues attached to this?
Look, the nature of the AI solutions that we're discussing here, it's I would say almost zero. There's always going to be when you're managing huge data sets, there's obviously going to be a risk from a data privacy point of view. And let's be honest, call a spade here. The most contentious issue with regards to AI right now would be the fact that data privacy can't really be maintained fully unless you're using a correctly ring-fenced AI capability, which treats your data as an exclusive data set that is completely locked off from the public domain. So if you are, if you are dealing with, billing data, stuff to do with customer information, stuff that might expose a customer in any particular way, if you allowing your AI algorithm to touch into more of those administrative aspects of the workflow, then of course there's a greater chance of data privacy risk and the associated the ethical aspects. But even if you forget about that part, if you forget about the customer part, and if you go and say, let's just employ AI as a starting point to do things like the following. Let's go and check and regulate, or not regulate, let's go and investigate the pressure, the varying pressure points within the existing system. And let's use some IoT across the water distribution system, and we're going to detect pressure. We're going to also detect flow. And we're going to look at those data points together with a whole bunch of other data points inside the actual water network. And then we're going to run some algorithms where AI is going to be able to think for us and detect when it sees an anomaly between pressure and flow, it's going to detect a potential leak in that zone. There's no public or personally identifiable information in that transaction. That's a net IoT device to IoT device transaction where it's to do with water and a very specific type of data point involving water. So there's no real risk of exposing anyone's contact details or violating any kind of data privacy in that scenario. So I really think that it's a very safe domain for us to experiment in. And I think like you said earlier, the benefits far outweigh the potential risks. And even then, I would say from a data point of view, there's hardly any risks on this particular area.
Thank you, Karushan. Volker van Verden, let me come back to you. I just want to extrapolate a little bit your cooperative office park example. And one of the questions that we've got here is complimenting you on the whole circularity debate, which is important. I guess the question that's being asked here is how you ramp up that kind of cooperation from a community perspective and from a bigger business perspective to make sure that you're managing risk effectively. Are you able to achieve scale, in other words, with that type of thinking?
One would hope so. I think we know that the rates at which water is charged or billed and the inaccuracies of these, and if you look at the full cost of trying to manage a water bill and the kind of things that Tony's raised earlier, and the cost of maintaining infrastructure. Imagine all the good tech that Krishna has just talked about being applied with a 10-year view in an office park. You'd have 100% accuracy, no leaks, stable water costs, and like in the solar environment, your water in 10 years' time is going to cost you half of what the local authorities billing other customers who are not in your closed loop environment. You will then harvest off your rooftops, you'll create your own grey water, you'll have filtered water that is potable, and you'll run your factories in your environment in a much more resilient way. If you look at that economic model and the incremental savings you get over a period of time, and these are 10 and 20-year decisions that just make you better and cheaper and more successful, that is the way to scale and to make it efficient and successful.
Professor Turton, back to you. Both you, Karushan, and Volker have all raised some very effective solutions, but let me suggest to you that all of this is going to require deep technical ability, and often in the case of business or with the authorities themselves, is going to require money. And we all know that funding is in short supply at the moment. Is there a way of approaching this from a step up method? In other words, you can start building better risk with what people have got right now, or do you have to go in boots and all?
Okay, right. That's a lot of issues there. Let's unpack them. So the first thing now is, I believe this is an assumption of mine, so I'm either right or wrong. My assumption is that we are on the threshold of a transition into a completely different business model going forward. This is my assumption. So there are fundamental changes taking place, certainly in the South African economy, about service delivery, etc. So in other words, this is going to pose an existential threat to the very existence of certain businesses. Some will flourish and some will die. And it's as simple as that. So when this starts happening now, we can have another look at cost. And now, what I like about what Volker was talking about, and I fully support it, is this whole idea of an opportunity cost. What is the cost of doing nothing? And to my shock and horror, many corporates that I've dealt with actually don't have a full understanding of what the impact is, for example, of a disruption of supply for 1 hour, for 1 day, for 1 week. They have no idea. They haven't got a clue, not even a thumbsuck clue about that. So it's going to start changing the way that we think about things. But now let's just make another assumption. And the other assumption, which I think is a correct assumption, is that solutions going forward are not going to be about one single invention or one single idea. Solutions are going to be the integration of different concepts and different ideas. And one of those things now is the digitization platform. And what that means now, I don't want to just sort of use jargon. What that means is because you can measure, you can manage, but you can also value, and therefore you can spin out of that now a fungible asset that can be traded. Whew. Now, there's a lot of stuff I've said there now, okay? So I believe we are on the transition right now to a future where assets are going to be traded, where fungible assets are going to be traded. Digital tokens, in other words, blockchain-generated tokens are going to be traded with respect to water quality, all sorts of water-related issues. And once again, I'm working with a team of people right now that's actually developing this thing, and this is going to be dependent on the digitization system. Now, what this implies is that you're going to start seeing new revenue streams coming online. And let me just give you an example. I've been working of late around the Centurion Lake area. So Centurion Lake is a nice little unit of analysis because there are lots of things happening there. Upstream, there's a major wastewater treatment works, the Olifantsfontein wastewater treatment work that is managed by East Rand Water Ervat. Now, they've got a problem in terms of the effluent that they discharge, and there's a whole lot of issues around that. But let's just say now that what they are discharging, we can prove numerically that their very presence there actually improves the quality of water, because the E. coli count upstream of them is higher than downstream of them, which is counterintuitive. But we can actually monitor that with real-time data, and we can now start generating a water credit there, because that water credit means that even if they are slightly dysfunctional today, they are still doing something positive, and you can measure what that net positive is off a baseline, and you can then start generating credits. Now, who would buy those credits? Well, the big commercial real estate that happens to own shopping complexes, or that happens to have tenants that are restaurant owners, etc. They are going to have a vested interest in improved water quality in Centurion Lake. And you've got other companies there. You've got major mining companies that are there. You've got Outsurance has got a head office there. So all of these companies have got CSI a budget available to them, and the CSI is really nothing more about ensuring the sustainability of your business. So we believe that you're going to start seeing in this new revolution, not only a digital revolution, but you're also going to start seeing the emergence of tradable assets. Think of bitcoins or something of that nature now. Think of carbon credits, but related to water. And instead of a carbon credit that is related to the entire atmosphere, the entire planet, this is going to be directed to a specific catchment area. Because if we can start measuring and managing what's happening around Centurion Lake, guess what? We can go the other way, Greshan. We can go downstream this time now, and we can start saying, well, if we are making a meaningful impact here in the upstream headwaters of the river, that eventually ends up in Hartbeespoort Dam, we can now start actually looking at those fungible assets further downstream as well. So I think we are on the cusp of a revolution now, and that revolution is going to be disruptive, and it's there's going to be winners and losers, and those that get ahead of the curve are going to understand it and benefit from it. Those that don't are going to wake up and say, what happened now? You get three kinds of people in the world. Those that make things happen, those that watch things happen, and those that wake up and say, what the hell just happened? So that's where we are at the moment.
All right, Anthony Turton, as always, blunt and to the point. Thank you very much, Ed. I am going to take those as your closing remarks, because we are coming to the end of this session. By the way, to any of the panel members, if there's one more water pun that is mentioned, you're not part of the UMSA trip to Bermuda. KG and to Volker van Verden, I want to ask you this question. In conclusion, what is the call to action then to the risk management community in South Africa? All of you have raised some very useful ideas, ideas that are very future focused. But in the here and now, Karushan, what's the immediate call to action for risk managers? Once they've finished this webinar, what do they need to start doing?
So I think that the first thing is to acknowledge that this is a risk in the immediate term, like Professor Turton said earlier, and I'm never going to use the pun again. Basically, he mentioned that you can't really rely on the fact that the municipality is, we have to be very cautious about how we go about demarcating the boundaries of these risks. If we are excessively broad stroke about the way in which we define these risks, we're gonna wind up with a problem that can't be solved. So we have to take the concept of water risk and decode that and see what that means precisely within the organization. So to a risk manager, start by being pragmatic. Start by understanding your own house before you go beyond the boundaries of your house. Understand your business. Try to invest in systems, tools, support, suppliers that get you to better understand your demand forecasting, as it might look for the next 2 to 3 years. How is the business going to expand? What are going to be the various water demands as the business continues to expand? And break that down into as much detail as possible. Based on that, as we look a little bit further out, as we move into risk mitigation plans and to longer term strategies, I think it becomes very important to start looking at how to go about partnering with them, with the municipality to act as a bit of a thought leader and in some way, really assist the municipalities to take steps along the digital journey. We know that solutions are now available to us. We know this, that were not possible 2 to 3 years ago. I mean, as recent as 2 to 3 years ago, we couldn't do 50% of the things that I can say to you confidently can be done today. And that's a big deal. It takes more than just me and a handful of others running around like mad people trying to say, hey, now there's a solution. Like the big constraint that you had 2 years ago, it's gone. And so we depend on business to for their own sake, for their own risk management sake, to partner with municipalities and try to overcome this particular mindset or operational challenge. And remember that municipalities, depending on where you're located, where your operations are, municipalities are very amenable to this kind of dialogue. They really look for this kind of public-private partnership and discourse to overcome some of their burdens. So risk managers out there, you might think that this is beyond, at first glance, it might seem like it's beyond your purview, but I definitely encourage you to seek out ways in which you could go beyond the heading level of understanding this thing called water crisis and really go into the detail and see how you can step out of the traditional lens and see how you can work with municipalities and in concert with government to really embark upon a long-term risk mitigation plan.
Thank you, Karushan. Volker, I'll give the final word to you.
Thank you. I was going to say something about a solution, but I'll rather talk about the double whammy. We heard that from 2002, we became 90%, 98% allocated water environment. And the area of electricity and the costs are very, very similar to this. We have used water on the basis that it's freely available. When you turn that around and saying, what is the least way I can use water and what is the most optimal way I can make savings of it? And similarly, in terms of opportunity, cost and sacrifice, what if I don't have water for a long time? What does it really mean to me? For example, I was in a conversation with a mining environment earlier today, and they use a dam, and if the dam empties, the mine stops. This is fundamental. So we spoke about things like evaporation management, where you put various techniques over the water. Now that used to be funny, and now it's essential. So the issue then is, what is the most efficient and cost-effective way of minimizing and optimizing your use of water? And that becomes a risk opportunity and a strategic advantage to your business. Not because you're reducing a cost that used to be small, you're managing a strategic resource in your business, as we said, in production, in process, and in people. And if you look at it that way and you understand your own business model that way, which points to what we've spoken earlier, but has not been done from a risk impact point of view. When you do that, you unlock a lot more measurements in terms of the financial upside of optimizing the way you use water, and then you can unlock those areas to allocate capital to make yourself more resilient and more sustained around the harvesting and the use of water in other ways. So I think there's a completely different measurement and upside model that's available.
Volker van Woerden is Strategic Risk Principal at Risconet Africa, along with Karushan Govender, author of the book Age of Agency, Rise with AI, also the founder of the strategic tech marketing agency Black Fox, and Professor Anthony Turton, specializing in water resource management as a strategic issue. Thank you very much to all three of you. Christopher Palm is IRMSA's Chief Risk Advisor, and I'll hand over to him.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Jeremy Maggs, for, again, like always, facilitating a marvelous panel. And I have to say, I wasn't part of the panel, so, you know, referencing upstream and downstream for me was a watershed moment in this webinar. Karushan, that was just for you. Is my video on? I'm not seeing myself here.
And we're not seeing you either, Chris, but keep talking. We get the gist.
Yeah, thank you. So to the panel, thank you so much. Professor Turton, Volker, and of course, Karushan, thank you for sharing with us today what I believe, you know, we did a piece of work talking about strategy, risk, and resilience. And I think the risk conversation today, it permeated across all of these angles, thinking about risk, thinking about the future, you know, what do we see as risk management? And then, of course, how do we build resilience? It's the conversation that is required in the risk management space. That's the value proposition that we bring forward. And to now want to summarize what was just shared by the panel, I think would be a waste of time. But I do believe one of the things that I would like to make a comment on is to think about this particular risk using a layering context as well. Now, of course, I think I'm stating the obvious, but in my mind, if you add to the mix failing municipalities as you did, if we add to that a potential drought that you could bring into the systems thinking, and then not having electricity or not having energy available, and then thinking about an election outcome that may either speed the resurrection up or it may delay it. What does that mean for us? And I like to call it time to market. The actions that we need to take. How long will that take for us to build the resilience that all of you, Volker, the professor and Karushan, were talking about? How long will that take? And if you have done the layered sort of thinking or the systems thinking around what could all impact what we are talking about, this particular risk, what does that mean for us? Do we have enough time? And if not, what is it that we do? And, you know, you work on this on a continuum. So, Jeremy, thank you very much for facilitating this panel. And to the panel members, again, Professor Turton, Volker, and Karushan, thank you so much for sharing these insights, because the conversation today, I felt was taking the risk conversation into the future. Yes, we were reflecting, we were using hindsight, we were using insight, but what you shared with us also challenged our 140 odd panel members that are in the room to think forward, to think about the effect of uncertainty on this particular risk. So with that, I would like to thank the members that stayed around, and of course the panel again. With that, I'll close the meeting. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you very much.